gentlemen, it is Wednesday evening and it is 10 p.m. here on the East Coast. It is 7 p.m. on the West Coast, and it is probably 3 a.m. if you are watching us from the United Kingdom, 4 a.m. if you're up late watching us from France or Germany on Central European time. And it is 10 a.m. in the morning if you happen to be in Hong Kong or Singapore. Tonight is a special episode of Poker Uncensored. It is the Mike Postle special. We're going to be talking about perhaps the biggest controversy in poker over the last couple of weeks. It's a huge one. A lot of people are interested in it. And you can be a part of the show. And here's how. All you've got to do is post your comments directly on YouTube. Post them on YouTube. Post them on YouTube. We'll be able to put them on the screen. We'll be able to address them. You can tweet using hashtag Poker Uncensored. And while you're at it, you might as well use hashtag Postal and hashtag Stones. That way people can, when they search for those hashtags, see your questions come up and know that they can find the answers live, of course, right here on Poker Uncensored. So before we get rolling here, everybody should take a moment and send the YouTube link to all your friends, anyone in the poker community that you think is interested in this topic. That way they can tune in, because you wouldn't want them to miss this. Hey, you're tuned in and watching. The more people that watch this, the better, of course. So we are shortly going to get rolling with the next thing here, but just a little bit about myself here, right? So I was nicknamed His Highness of Hold'em. I launched a poker community and a podcast to give people the chance to talk about poker with freedom so they could speak their opinions without facing prosecution, persecution, or censorship. And I host Poker Uncensored, a podcast that isn't afraid to touch on controversial topics or have controversial, unhinged guests. Yes, Mike himself has been invited to come onto the show and defend himself. He has not responded to that request. I guess the guy maybe is guilty and he's afraid that he will incriminate himself if he comes on. And that's unfortunate because, a couple days ago he was proclaiming he was innocent. So just who is this guy, right? Who is he? Because some people said, I never heard of this guy. Well, he is a professional poker player. He has $536,000 in career tournament winnings, and he frequently plays cash at Stone's Gambling Hall on Stone's Live poker streams. This is a guy who has a 94% session win rate. It's pretty good. If I had a 94% session win rate, I would probably be at a poker room right now playing instead of running this podcast, because basically that means, hey, if I play poker 100 days, I'm going to be winning 94 of those days, and I could probably, quit my job and just start playing 510 and make $1 million a year. His average profit, 60 big blinds an hour. Now, if you're playing 510, it's pretty nice, right? You're pulling in $600 every hour of profit, but he's actually playing 1-3, but still at 1-3, that's $180 an hour. I mean, that's more money than people get paid. People who go to university, they get a master's degree, they get a PhD. They don't even make that much. So that's pretty good. And by the way, here is a picture of Mike. Now, if you look at his hat, you can kind of see it fits normally on his head here. There are some allegations that at one point he cheated at poker by having some sort of device hidden in his hat. And by the way, if you are listening live, because we've got several folks live, you can post your questions on YouTube. You can tweet them again using hashtag Poker Uncensored. That's one word, hashtag Poker Uncensored. And of course, you can always send them in through the Northeast Poker Unlimited Facebook group. So for those who are on, we're going to get rolling with our first question that came in from a viewer. So let's see here. So Jay says, the Mike Postle story is interesting, but in reality, players in the New England area are usually 1-2, 1-3, 2-5, 5-10 players, nowhere near the area of Mike Postle money. Why should we care? Well, this was actually a guy who he was killing it at the 1-3 table. So this is one of the crazy things about the story, right? If somebody's so good at poker, why are they playing at 1-3 at such low stakes, right? If he's making all this money, if he's got the ability to read his opponents amazingly, why? And I think Scott Van Pelt on ESPN got at this. Why isn't the guy in Vegas playing 5,100 or 100, 200? Why isn't he at the World Series of Poker, where you can buy in for $10,000 and you could win $7 million at the final table? You could become a millionaire at the World Series of Poker, you're not going to become a millionaire at a 1-3 table. And this guy is alleged to have only won like 250,000 while cheating, right? So if he's still great at poker, why wouldn't he do that? And then just another factor here, and let me see if I can get this to actually work the way I want it to. So there is a lawsuit against Mike and a lot of other people. And that lawsuit is basically alleging that he, as well as Stones, engaged in some serious criminal acts. So let me see if this will work if I try to bring this up here and share it on the podcast here. So, yeah, so let me zoom out a little on this. So, in this lawsuit, which was filed on the federal court in the Eastern District of California yesterday, part of it actually goes through and explains all of the parties that are involved here. And one of the parties here, number 9, is actually a New Englander. So, Mr. Scott is a citizen of the state of New Hampshire. Now, New Hampshire is a place that we actually talk about a lot on the podcast because your host is here in New Hampshire. And also, a lot of our listeners are from the greater New Hampshire / greater Boston area. But Mr. Scott, aka Jason Scott, being his first name, is from New Hampshire. So a New Englander has been impacted here, right? A New Englander is suing Mike Postle and Stones to try to recover, presumably, some of the money that he lost. So if I can switch back here to the other slide that I had up, get back to it here. So again, Mike Postle, average profit, 60 big blinds an hour. Why does everybody hate this guy? Well, his win rate is way above the most successful players, and hours of video from Stone's Live Poker got reviewed by Joe Ingram and others. Now, I made the mistake tonight of going up against Joe Ingram's show accidentally because I thought he was on at 6 p.m. He was supposed to be talking to the woman who brought forth the allegations. Unfortunately, when he said 6 p.m., that was Pacific time, and so he's still on the air. So that's going to kill our viewership on Poker Uncensored, unfortunately. Oh well. But anyway, Joe reviewed hours and hours and hours of video. He put together a video that basically went through and explained what was going on. And Postle was able to make these insane folds and reads that no other player would. The greatest players that you know of, people like Negreanu, people like Ivy, people like Hellmuth, would be stacking off, and he was able to fold. So this led to suspicion that somehow he knows exactly what the other players are holding. And he also was constantly looking at his phone, and there was at one point a bulge in his hat after Stone stopped allowing phones to be used during live streams, leading to suspicion that he used some sort of software or electronic to cheat. And Veronica Brill, who, yes, is live now with Joe Ingram, came forward with these allegations after Stone's Gambling Hall did not do anything about the situation. So again, if you've got questions, feel free to post them. We do have one that came in from a guy named Scott. He says, this is a trolling question. So we're not even going to bother with that one. We're not going to bother with it. But we do have a guy named John, and John wants to know, how is it that someone could cheat at poker? Let me see if we can get this up on the stream here. So, how is it that someone could cheat at poker? Well, that's a great question. So, there are a lot of ways that you could cheat at poker, right? You could call off $50 and somehow only put 45 in and hope the stack doesn't get counted correctly. That's cheating. You could try to move your head to, illegitimately sneak a view at somebody's hole cards. That's cheating. If it's a game where the deck is being passed around and you're going to deal, from the bottom of the deck or the middle instead of the top, yeah, that's cheating. So there are ways that you can cheat at poker, but none of them seem to be as serious as this, where he was actually allegedly being fed the information about the hole cards that all of the other people played. And we'll get into a little bit of that more later in the podcast. So that's why everybody hates him. But the real question here is he guilty? Right? People want to know, is this guy guilty? And I'm going to tell you, I think, yes, he is guilty in the court of public opinion. The problem, that's not a real court, right? So the court of public opinion basically means, yeah, everybody in the poker community thinks the guy's guilty. All of the videos that are out there basically alleging, well, not all of them, but the Joe Ingram videos, a few other things are basically alleging the guy's guilty. And, well, People think he's guilty. They think he did it. People are sending threats to the guy and his daughter. Now, I think that that's unacceptable. Right now in the Old West, if you cheated at poker, yeah, they would round you up. They would they would round you up. They'd get a rope, get a tree, take care of you. You wouldn't be cheating again, or you might just get shot with a revolver, or thrown, tied up, put on a railroad track, and run over. Whatever they used to do in the Old West, that was how justice was carried out. Today, that's really not acceptable anymore. There's processes for people to be brought before a court, given a proper trial, and punished. So the court of public opinion, though, thinks he's guilty. Nobody's going to want to play with this guy at poker anymore, probably. Although some have said, hey, they would challenge him heads up with like no live stream or whatever, but people don't like him. But is he criminally guilty? I would say the answer is no. And here's why. To be criminally guilty in a criminal case, the burden of proof, and we consulted with someone who actually is an attorney on this, is that you need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the person is guilty. And that's very hard when you only have circumstantial evidence and there's no forensic evidence. Remember, these allegations that have been brought forth are based on watching video of him playing from the live streams. It's based on adding up how much he won. Nobody has done a forensic analysis to look at, was he receiving messages that indicated what people had. Nobody did a forensic analysis to see, did he somehow hack the system that has the whole card information. Nobody did a forensic analysis of the table to say, hey, maybe the encryption was broken between the RFID readers and the computer that's used for the live streaming. We just don't have that. It's all circumstantial evidence, and you're never going to get somebody convicted on a criminal count like that. It's just not going to happen. The jury is going to hear the case. And actually, Joe Ingram did a video, parodying an attorney for Mike Postle. But essentially in court, it's going to be, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the only thing that my client is guilty of doing is being one of the best poker players on this planet. And my client did that because he went out and he studied that game. He learned how to make reads, and he's good at poker. Would you punish the world's greatest chess master for winning too much? Would you punish a football team because they went out there and did their best and they won? Of course not. Ladies and gentlemen, my client has done nothing wrong. All of this evidence is simply circumstantial, put forth by people who are jealous that they just weren't up to my client's level of skill. And basically, the jury is going to acquit the guy. That's what's going to happen. So the lawyer comes in, hey, you guys don't have any evidence, you're acquitted. But where you can nail someone is when you look at the concept of a civil case, because civil liability is entirely possible here for Mike Postle. And here's why. The burden of proof for a civil case is way lower. All you need is a preponderance of the evidence. And what that means is that a preponderance of the evidence, you're basically saying, well, it's more likely that he cheated than he didn't cheat. And that's a lot easier to prove than to prove criminal guilt. So Jay has a question here. He says, stealing signs in baseball, running a red light with no cops around, millions of things done until they get caught. In this case, shit or caught, just ban him and be done. Too simple. Well, Jay, I think if he is indeed, caught cheating at poker, first off, yeah, he probably would get booted from Stones unless they were complicit in it. And that's what's also being alleged, that Stones was complicit in this cheating, that they either did it because they wanted to create a story that would get people to tune into their live stream, or that there were, rogue employees of Stones that were engaging in this conduct to help Mike cheat. So if they were complicit, maybe that's why they didn't figure out, oh, he's cheating and ban him and be done with it. But also, I don't think that's fair to the people who played against him, right? If he was cheating and these people played against him, they went into Stone's gambling hall thinking that it was a fair poker game, that their skill would be what would let them win. And they were basically in a rigged game where they had no chance. Because if I were to play against, let's say, Ivy, Negreanu, Helmuth, Johnny Chan, some of the greatest people in poker, and my level of skill is not up to the par with them, but I knew the whole cards that they had, I would be able to basically take all of these guys' money. Because if I had, let's say, I don't know, bottom pair, and they have bottom pair with a worse kicker, I, heads up, could say, well, you know what? I shouldn't call here. Let's say the guy's bluffing. I probably shouldn't call here because I'm probably beat, but I'm going to ship it all in because I know that even if he calls, I outkick him, right? That gives me an advantage. Or, bad beat scenarios. Let's say that I've got pocket aces and the flop is like ace, queen, queen, and the other guy had pocket queens. Most players are not going to be able to get away from flopping, a full house like that, especially aces full. Well, I'll be able to make that fold because I know, hey, my opponent has pocket queens. The flop came with two queens, and he's basically got the nuts. And the only way that I'm going to beat him is if I somehow run out that last ace for, aces, quad aces over quad queens. So, you know, that's why I think it's not enough to ban him. I think there has to be some sort of restitution back to people. So let's take a quick look at Twitter, see if anybody's put in any comments. So let's see. I do have one comment telling me, hey, you should reschedule the podcast because Veronica Brill is live right now with Joe Ingram. That, again, was unfortunate scheduling. I probably should have realized that Joe Ingram is out west, and when he said 6 p.m. meant Pacific time. So in the future, yes, we'll try to avoid running the podcast against Joe Ingram, especially when we're talking about a story that he's been covering because he's had about 10 episodes worth of stuff on there. So our next question comes from Timothy. And Timothy asks, would you play Mike Postle heads up? Well, that's an interesting question. So normally I am not one to turn down a heads up challenge. However, in this case, I think if I were playing him heads up, one, I would want it to be someplace where they don't have RFID cards. And two, I don't know if I would win because I think that given his record of having won, prior to his play at Stones, $500,000 of career earnings, he might actually be a better poker player than I am. I don't have that much in earnings. I have like 11,000 in career earnings showing up on Hendon Mob. He has 536,000. Now, part of that is because of the lack of Hendon Mob reporting in New Hampshire. Different topic. We're going to get to that later. So King Luffy chimed in here. He's got a question. I would like to see Mike play. I guess you mean play on another stream, see his results, and punish him accordingly. That's an interesting topic because if you look at Mike's play, he basically at Stones would play when they had the live stream going, and as soon as the live stream ended, the guy got up and cashed out. Other people tend to stick around, play a little bit more. He always got up and left when the live stream was off. So he basically only played when they were live streaming. And then the other thing is, he never played there's other rooms. You got Live at the Bike that does streams. You got some in Vegas. He never played on any of these other streams. He only played at Stones. And so what's happened here, a $30 million lawsuit has been filed against Mike, as well as Stones Gambling Hall, Justin Caratis, and John Doe's 1 to 10 and Jane Doe's 1 to 10, who are basically co-conspirators that worked on this. And they're alleging a lot of stuff, right? So they're alleging that they've got racketeering, fraud, negligent misrepresentation, more fraud, because if you see I didn't double list this accidentally, right? It's actually here, number 2, fraud, number 8, fraud, in addition to libel, unjust enrichment, and constructive fraud, which, not being an expert attorney, I don't really know what the difference is between fraud and fraud and constructive fraud, but both of those seem like pretty bad things that really are only done by criminals. It's like assault, aggravated assault and assault. Both are crimes. They're both probably bad things. Or like murder and aggravated murder. Well, all right, the non-aggravated murder, it doesn't make it not bad because it's not aggravated. But ultimately, to me, this seems a little high, right? The actual damages here are not 300 or not 30 million. Apparently, 250,000 is what he won illegitimately. So I don't think they're going to get $30 million worth of damages here. But one of the reasons that you might ask for 30 million is to convince people to come up with a settlement, right? Because Stones has plenty of money and their lawyers might just say, you know what, let's just settle this. We'll pay them like $2 million. They can all shut up. We'll move on. and we don't have to deal with this and battle it out in court and risk potentially losing 30 million because, hey, you might get a sympathetic jury that says, hey, these people were wronged, right? They showed up to compete and they played for hours and hours against someone who was cheating and had the help of people at Stones, and they might get a big amount of payout. And Stones could say, hey, the amount of money we're going to have to spend to defend this, the amount of money we're going to have to go through, we might as well just say, hey, we're not even going to bother to really fight this one. We'll propose that we settle for like $2 million. The attorneys are going to take a bunch of it, but people will get some of the money back or some that they lost, right? And then Postle himself doesn't even have anywhere near 30 million. That's why you basically sue the casino on top of that, because they've got the money. He doesn't. So we're going to take a look here now at once again the court indictment, because there's a lot of interesting stuff in this that I want to talk through with you guys. So if we look through this here, so here we go. So one of the allegations here basically says that all of the games that are an issue here took place at Stone's gambling hall, and that the casino operator habitually sought to downplay concerns of cheating that were brought to them. And that's where you can get at the negligence, right? Essentially, they promoted this idea that Postle is a gifted individual with great poker skills when he was really cheating. And then, of course, here in the lawsuit, they allege that this case represents the single largest known cheating scandal in the history of broadcast poker. That is huge, right? That is a huge allegation. This is saying that no cheating scandal in the history of broadcast poker is as big as what went down at Stones. And really, that's probably a good thing. That probably means that, hey, there hasn't been a huge cheating scandal prior. But that's a pretty big allegation that's in the lawsuit. I've got a question here from Jay, First Amendment. There are rumors that Matthew Solon, that is your great host of Poker Uncensored, will be participating in Hampton Falls' upcoming ladies' event to prove a point that men play better than women. Any comment? Yes, I will comment here. This rumor is absolutely false. I will not be playing in the Hampton Falls upcoming ladies' event. Secondly, I do not believe that any gender is better than another at poker. This is a game, a sport where everybody can come in and have an equal opportunity to win, whether you're male, female, non-gendered, or non-binary gendered, intersex, if you're transgender, everybody's got an equal opportunity to win. In fact, I have seen instances where men who lack in skill at poker show up. They think that, because the person's a woman, they must not know how to play, and they get owned. They stack off, they lose all their money, and it's actually great to see, because it's basically like, the chauvinistic idiot just stacked off and lost this money. Continuing on anyway through this, so basically, as we go through the lawsuit, right, so there's a lot of stuff listing out, all of the different parties that are involved. Let's get to the good stuff, though. So, yeah, so here's something that's interesting, too, right? So the plaintiffs are saying, hey, we know one of the people that helped Postle cheat and concealed that behavior, but they haven't listed that in the indictment because they're waiting for discovery. And I think discovery is going to be interesting because, again, right now, all of the evidence against him has basically been circumstantial. There's no hard evidence. Maybe they're hoping to get some forensic evidence through the discovery phase. This next section basically just says, hey, here's why this court has jurisdiction. Look, it makes sense. The court should have jurisdiction because it's in the right district. So let's see here. So continuing on, right? So they talk about how, they have the RFID tables that let people see the cards, etc., how they've got different cameras on the tables, etc., etc. But getting into the interesting part. So here we go. So the optimal decision making by Mike Postle was so precise that it let him record net winnings in more than 94% of the Stones live poker games that he played, even though they are of elevated variance and of a fixed duration. Now, again, if this guy is so good that he wins 94% of the time, why wasn't he playing the entire suite of WSOP events this summer in Las Vegas. Because if he went there and he won, let's say it even dropped and he only won 84% of the time, right? He only cashed 84% of the events he played. If this guy managed to do that, he would be ridiculously rich. This would be a guy who, you would just see him rising up the Hendon Mob rankings, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know why, right? Why is it, if he's so good, why is he playing 1-3? Why is he playing in a Northern California gambling hall? Why isn't he at the Aria in Las Vegas? It just doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, looking back through, again, the lawsuit that was filed here. So analytical observation reveals that his exponential winnings cannot be explained through fine-tuned abilities to read opponents, as myriad optimal plays made by Mr. Postle required not merely analysis of his opponent's self-perceived strength or weakness, but rather the precise composition of such hand. Basically saying, this wasn't some sort of read. He wasn't putting them on a range. He knew exactly what they held, and that's how he was able to fold. Let's see here. Jay asks, well, this is not really a question. Oh, it is. All right. He says, I will be playing the 12 noon tournament at Encore Casino tomorrow. Are you interested in a $500 last longer bet? Unfortunately, I will not be in Las Vegas tomorrow, so I will not be able to play that event. Continuing through the lawsuit here again, some of this is really interesting. If you've got the time, I would say it would be fun to read through the whole thing. Item 60 actually is pretty interesting here. This kind of gets into what I was just talking about. So it says, again, Postle does not play on any other streamed poker game, even though they've got one with higher stakes and therefore more chance to win money in California. And he doesn't play in other games during this time, even though, once again, there's higher stakes games running in Vegas, Reno, LA, Atlantic City, Southern Florida. I presume that's Seminole Hard Rock, I guess. I don't know what else. Seminole Coconut Creek too has poker, but Atlantic City, right? Why is this guy not at the Borgata? Why is he not firing bullets at the 1 million guaranteed? Why is he not playing the almighty stack, 750,000 guaranteed? Why isn't he playing the World Poker Tour main event? Buy in for $3,500 and win that. Like, why would you only play in this one room in Northern California if you're so good and you can win a lot? Doesn't make sense. So Joseph Bautista has a comment, and oh boy, I shouldn't even throw this one up here, but we are Poker Uncensored, so if you want to use a little profanity, why not? He basically says Postle is a lil bitch. Now, I think he put Lil because it sounds cool, because, rappers like Lil Wayne, right? Sounds cool. But if he just called him Little, doesn't sound cool. Anyway, yeah, people hate this guy, right? This is probably not the worst thing he's been called. I'm sure if we looked at Twitter and we said, hey, like, what names have people been calling Mike Postle, we're going to see a heck of a lot worse going on. So let's see here. Looking at some of the other stuff here. Let me see here. Oh, let me pull up. Sorry, let me pull up this document once again. So here's the other allegation, right? That Postle used some sort of wire communication mechanism to defraud his opponents, gaining knowledge of the whole cards. So how could this work? Basically, it's been demonstrated that the way that some of this live streaming software works, the whole card data from the RFID readers, and RFID is basically a wireless technology. It allows you to take you can take a card, right? You have a little chip inside that card, and that chip that's inside the card is going to basically relay to a reader what the card is, right? So basically it sends a code to the reader. The reader knows, hey, this code means it's the ace of spades. This other code means it's the king of diamonds, whatever the case might be. Essentially, that information goes back to a server, and it's used to put up the graphics on the screen. Now, if somebody's watching that live feed from the card readers that goes back to that server, and you can apparently do this using Windows Media Player, which, it's alleged that Postle had that up on his phone during these matches. Now, if it's an iPhone, this wouldn't work because Windows Media Player doesn't run on that. But apparently on Android or Windows Phone, if he's using that, it would. So that's something that, the investigators, they probably need to figure out what kind of phone did he actually have that he was sitting with, right? Because if he was using an iPhone, that might actually just clear him of any wrongdoing right there. But anyway, it was alleged that basically he was able to watch some sort of feed. He could look down at his phone, see what the other players had. And he was aided by people who furnished him that information. That's the other piece in the lawsuit, and that's why there's all those Jane Does and John Does that are named. In any case, what it said is that Postle is seen repeatedly looking at his cellular telephone under the table and endeavoring to spread all of his hole cards over the RFID table sensor in a deliberate and unusual manner. Right? So basically it's saying, hey, he is trying to make it so that if there's some sort of malfunction on the readers, it can be covered up. So anyway, the indictment again, or not, I'm sorry, not the indictment, the lawsuit, because it's not an indictment. An indictment would be a criminal count. It's a civil lawsuit that was brought forth in federal court, goes through and comes up with basically all of the stuff that says, here's how we know he cheated, which is, again, sort of circumstantial. Here's how we know Stones is involved, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And ultimately, they're saying, hey, he profited more than $250,000 from his play, that every one of the plaintiffs named contributed chips to pots he played, that most of them lost money in those sessions, that Postle would not have won that much money if he wasn't cheating. And therefore, one, these people derive their living from playing poker. They've had their confidence in the integrity of the game compromised. Therefore, they are asking for damages that amount up to, let's see here. They really should tell people that when you file court proceedings, it's got to be like more brief. But anyway, the plaintiffs are asking that the court enter judgment in their favor for $10 million to be divided pari passu between and amongst them based on the amount of minutes that they spent playing on Stone's live poker broadcast. So basically they're saying, now, this is the other ridiculous thing of courts. They love to use these Latin phrases, right? Like pari passu. They could just say divided equally, and everybody would know what that meant, but they got to use their Latin phrases because apparently, that's why you go to law school, I guess, is to learn these fancy Latin phrases. You can sound like, I'm this elite lawyer, blah, 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 blah. I'm a smart person and I know Latin, whatever. But anyway, basically it's saying take the $10 million, divide it evenly amongst us based on the divided based on a proration of the amount of minutes. So if somebody spent 1,000 minutes and the other person spent, 2,000 minutes, the person who spent the 2,000 minutes playing should get, I guess, double the amount that the person spent 1,000 minutes playing against them. That's really what it comes down to. But that's just in one section of the lawsuit. There's another two sections where they're asking for $10 million. And then there's another section that's actually asking for, weirdly, only $1,000 because Postle is accused of engaging in libel. Now, Jay has a question here. Why is 1-3 being live streamed? People want to see the higher buy-in games of popular players, celebrities, a brick of cash on the table. Why would a casino live stream such a low-stakes game? That's a great question. I don't know. So personally, I only watched the Stones live poker stream like once or twice. I wasn't tuning in every single week. I actually paid more attention to the World Series of Poker when it was on ESPN. But that's a great question. I guess maybe people want to see a game that they themselves can play, right? Most of the people that you see in your local poker room, they're not bankrolled to play at a level of like, 100, 200. They're not bankrolled to play at a level of even 510. But 1-3, yeah, they can show up with $100. They can buy in and they can enjoy the couple of hours of playing poker. And if they stack off, well, it's only $100. And if they, make a little money, then they can go and, I don't know, buy a steak dinner or whatever, or go to McDonald's on the way home or whatever they want. So it could be that sort of thing where it's like, hey, this is cool to see because this is something that I could see myself doing, right? If they were to do a live streamed let's say they got RFID tables at one of the casinos and poker rooms that's in the greater Boston area, and they did a live stream game. I would show up. I would play it. Now, I would want to make sure that they had proper security and procedures in place so that nobody's pulling shenanigans and sending the whole cards to anybody. But I don't want to do that. So anyway, folks, if you've got questions, send them in. Send them in. We're looking for more questions. And you know what? Let's take another peek and see if there's more questions here. Hold on a second and see if anybody tweeted us questions. All right, there are no questions on Twitter yet, so let's see if we can just continue on. So again, folks, if you want to know anything, if you want any other topics related to poker to get covered tonight, chime on in. But basically, when it comes down to it, I think that this lawsuit has a good potential to lead to some sort of settlement. And by the way, this is another interesting component here, right? So the lawsuit says, hey, the plaintiffs are damaged because one, they lost money, and two, they've lost the opportunity to earn money through honest games of poker being broadcast to the public. And that's something that's huge, because if people feel like these poker broadcasts are not honest, if they feel like it's rigged, they may not want to watch, right? Would you watch basketball games if you knew that the outcomes were predetermined, if you knew that it wasn't a fair game, right? Would you want to tune into the NFL on Sunday if you knew that it wasn't a fair game and it was rigged and that Commissioner Roger Goodell was calling the shots and deciding who's going to win? I don't think people would want to do that, right? And this is different than, say, wrestling, right? Professional wrestling, people know that that's not a true sport. It's considered sports entertainment. It has storylines. It's a part of the concept. But something like poker, this wasn't supposed to be fiction. This was supposed to be an honest game. And I myself, I feel like I was deceived as one of the people that would tune into some of these streams. But, that's another matter. That's, it's very interesting. Will people trust that these live streams are real, true poker matches or not? Jay wants to know, who says basketball isn't rigged? Well, that's a good question. I mean, maybe it is rigged. I don't know. But I don't think it is, because if basketball was rigged, LeBron James would have been in the playoffs last year, because the NBA would know that that would bring in viewership, right? If the NBA was rigged, they would maximize the viewership. They would have put King James in the playoffs, and the Lakers missed it. Jay also wants to know, we'll be discussing strip poker tonight. That's a good question. The answer to that, no, we will not be discussing strip poker tonight. Moving on. Additionally here, right, Stones breached their duty, and that's part of why they're getting sued. And that's another great thing, right? So Stones, how is it that somebody has access to the live hole card data, and yet they're able to take that data and allow somebody else to intercept it? They're able to transmit it to somewhere else. Why is it that the server that has that data is even accessible, theoretically, if what's being alleged that he was watching or connecting to that server? Why is that even accessible? Do you not have network technology that would prevent that? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's going on that I think really, a full legal discovery process, independent analysis of the configuration of the live stream equipment in the server needs to be conducted. The problem is that Stone said, hey, we did an investigation. We didn't find anything. So, if they were trying to cover it up, if Stones was complicit, could they have gone in and wiped all of that out, right? Could they have taken that server and basically, deleted all of the data off of it, DGOS the hard drive or overwritten it or whatever, eliminated it so that nobody can go in and recover how that thing was set up before? It's entirely possible. And that's, if that's the case, it's going to be really hard to prove that anything wrong happened here. So let's see if we have any additional questions or comments coming in here. Oh, we do have one. So this is coming from, this person wants to be anonymous, but they want to know, will Postle be on the show? So as we kind of let off with today, right? So we asked him, we invited him to come on the show, and he wouldn't do it. Again, I think it's because he's afraid he'll incriminate himself. Let's see if we've got any other questions that have come in here. All right, we have no other questions. So that is going to let us wrap this show up in the next couple of minutes then. So in conclusion, actually, hold on. We're not going to get there yet. Let's not quite. We're not going to wrap up yet. I've got one other thing to say about this. And I think it's everyone's responsibility, if you're a poker player, that when you think that there's some sort of cheating or some sort of impropriety going on, whether it's in, something that's a huge public event or it's just a small tournament at your local poker room, you've got a responsibility to speak up, right? You've got a responsibility to tell, whether it's the dealer, the floor people, the manager of the room, tell them what's going on, tell them about that impropriety, and give them the opportunity to take care of it. Now, if they don't, by all means, it should be made public. And that's why I think Veronica Brill deserves to be recognized. She went public. She made sure that these allegations got public attention after she had reported it to the people at Stones, and the management at Stones was useless, basically didn't do anything correct. They didn't have an independent investigation. And that's how everybody knows about this. That's how all of that essentially process of looking through all of the video came to be. So again, you guys, we're going to be ending this in the next 3 to 4 minutes. So if you have questions, you got to get it in. All right, here we go. Jay, checking the nuts on the river turner or cash scenario doesn't matter. What's your opinion? Soft play, cheating, players not knowing the rules. So I would say that there is a little bit of wiggle room in this, right? So if I have the nuts on the river and I'm last to act, I'm never checking. I'm raising. Every single time I am raising there. Or if nobody's bet, I'm obviously putting out some sort of bet. And then since I have the nuts, if they raise, I'm going to re-raise or I'm going to ship it all in. But anyway, a lot of people, they don't even know they have the nuts, right? So beginner players, they might have the nuts and they might think that somehow, somebody could have had a higher nuts, right? They don't, somebody has the nut straight, but they think somebody could have had a higher straight somehow. Or, I don't know, somebody had like top pair and, they river a flush or something and it's the nut flush because they had the ace of diamonds and they don't even realize that they rivered the nut flush. They just think they have top pair, right? Because they're a player who can't even read their own hand. So in that case, I don't think you need to punish the person for that. I don't think they're cheating. I don't think it's soft play. Now, tournament wise, the TDA rules used to say that basically, if you check the exclusive nuts on the river, it was considered to be soft play, penalty needed to be given. They revised that, right? Because it's basically based on, if the person just didn't realize they had the nuts, there's no need to really give them a penalty. But obviously, if they're repeatedly checking the nuts, then yeah, they might need to take an orbit. So I do think, checking the nuts on the river usually is not cheating. Could it be collusion? Perhaps it is. But it's very rare that you're going to see people colluding by checking the nuts on the river, and especially at these 1-3 tables. I don't think, a lot of the people that play at these 1-3 tables, they're not actually even smart enough to know how to collude at poker. So, that's the case there. So when it comes to Postle, my conclusion is this: he is guilty in the court of public opinion. And unless he comes up with irrefutable evidence to show he didn't cheat, people are going to think he's a cheater. He's going to walk into a poker room. He's going to be thought of as the guy who cheated at Stones. So he's guilty there. From a criminal perspective, this is sort of like O.J. Simpson. Yeah, maybe he did it. Unfortunately, you can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. In Postle's case, they don't have any hard evidence. They don't have any forensic evidence. It's all circumstantial. Can't prove it. He's never going to go to jail for this unless that evidence somehow becomes available, right? Hey, with the juice, the glove did not fit. Therefore, the jury acquitted him, right? Question again from Jay, slow rolling, cooler dick move. It is absolutely a dick move. It's unacceptable. It's dishonorable. I never slow roll, right? I was playing poker recently. I was at a 1-3 table, and I had king deuce suited. On the flop, I flop bottom pair with the deuce. I decide that I'm going to put chips in because I'm thinking, hey, maybe my opponent has middle pair. Maybe they'll fold middle pair. Maybe my opponent has, they had something like an ace king offsuit, and they're just going to fold to any bet on the flop because they figure they're beat if I'm betting. So I try to bet. I figure if I'm called, I'm probably behind. This is an effort to take down the pot. Now, that effort to take down the pot didn't work because I get called. So yeah, I figure I'm beat. Now, the run out on this hand is king-king, so now I have kings full, which is basically the nuts. It's technically not the nuts, but in this case, I'm pretty sure it is. I immediately say, hey, I have a full house. I flip over king 2. Yeah, the guy's not pleased because I called off from behind and got there somehow. The guy's not pleased, but I'm not going to slow roll him. I'm just going to say, look, I got the full house. Here it is. Now, other people, they like to pull off the old slow roll. I'm not sure if they're doing it because they're trying to tilt their opponents. I'm not sure if they're doing it because they're just professional slow rollers and they do it all the time. Or, my favorite is when somebody will say, oh, I missed, table their hand, and they actually have the winner because, yeah, their straight draw missed, but they hit 2 pair, and so, their, 8-10 offsuit, they didn't get the 9 for the straight, but they hit that 8 on the river. They have 2 pair now, and pocket aces are no good, so they accidentally slow roll, and that's how you basically know, hey, your opponent's an idiot, and you're probably going to end up with their money. So, again, in conclusion, Mike Postle, criminal, can't prove it. He's not going to go to jail unless they get more evidence. Civil case has a decent chance of having some sort of judgment for the plaintiff. The damages seem a bit high, but they're probably looking to settle. It has been a pleasure hosting Poker Uncensored this evening. We shall return at some point in the future. The haters and the losers, they say we're never coming back. They say this show is ending. That's not true. The show will be back. There will be an episode 7. And for episode 7, we're going to look to go to our format of having, another guest on the show, not just focused on one topic. And hey, yeah, we got a final question in here. Jay, again, a big fan of the First Amendment. I don't know why the guy doesn't use his real last name and uses the First Amendment, but I like the First Amendment. It's a good part of our Constitution. The Second Amendment's important too. The Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, all good. But angle shooting, good for the game or disrespectful. Doesn't matter if you've been angle shot or doing the angle shooting. Angle shooting, I think, is generally disrespectful and dishonorable. I don't see it as good for the game, but I see it as something that can be exploitable. So when I know somebody's angle shooting, I can take advantage of that and I can win money off them. Other people, they get upset at that angle shooting, and I get why. But what I like to do is exploit the angle shooter and win their money, and essentially sometimes also make their angle shooting ineffective. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure hosting Poker Uncensored this evening. As we wrap up, please remember we will be back for episode 7. Tell your friends about the show. And of course, if you tuned in late, you can go all the way back to the beginning on YouTube and watch the playback. Have a good evening, everyone.